Hello everybody, I'm Alyssa from Untitled Astrology, and I'm here to talk with you about the astrology of June 15th through 21st. We have a few things going on this week. We have a sign change, we have a few sluggish days, as well as a few aspects. So we have a little bit of a mixed bag to talk about. Before we get into all of that, I want to give you a reminder to like, follow, and subscribe so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on here, specifically these weekly videos, as well as the live meditations that we have streamed to both YouTube and Facebook Sunday nights. That is Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So you don't want to miss any of that. So we start out this week with the moon in the sign of Aquarius on Sunday. We don't have any major aspects and we don't have any major lunar aspects. So we're just following the moon here at the beginning of this week on Sunday. And then if we bring ourselves forward to Monday here, to June 16th, we have the moon in the sign of Aquarius until it moves into the sign of Pisces, just after 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Times are always Eastern here based on where I'm at, so you may have to translate that to your own time zone as always. So that's what we have going on for just the beginning parts of the week. And then if we bring it forward to Tuesday here, June 17th, this is where the action starts to come in. So we have Mars moving from the sign of Leo into the sign of Virgo here this week. So we get a bit of a shift here with Mars. Mars in Leo has been very loud, very proud. It can be bold, it can be courageous. It's the place of the sun. It's illuminated. There's a lot of energy going on in the sign of Leo. We move to the sign of Mercury, we move to Virgo, which is the sign of Mercury. It's the earthly place of Mercury. So you get a much more practical side of Mars compared to that fiery, passionate, creative energy that you get in the sign of Leo. So Mars in the sign of Virgo can be very efficient, very organized, very practical, like earth signs are. And you know, there can be a drive towards order out of necessity in the sign of Virgo. So if we have necessity in the sign of Virgo, and if Mars is a planet that can represent our drives, our ambitions, and our motivations, we can be driven or motivated to do things either out of necessity or out of practicality of trying to organize, bring things together, trying to do things a little bit more efficiently. Virgo is very good at compartmentalizing. It's very good at taking small little details and kind of organizing them or putting them together in a suitable fashion. And we see this symbolically, this type of necessity in the sign of Virgo based on the symbolic story of where we find Virgo within the solar year. So the sun's path and travel through the zodiacal wheel from Aries through this all the way to the sign of Pisces, there's a symbolic story that goes along with that. When we are looking at the qualities of each sign and then the planets that go along with them, we're looking at the symbolic quality of light that the sun holds within those signs. We can see this play out within the northern hemisphere at the same seasonally at the same time as happens zodiacally, but it's a symbolic story. So it doesn't really matter if you live in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. It's just that those of us that are in the northern hemisphere may be able to relate to that symbolic story because it kind of lines up with our seasons here. So Virgo is the sign that comes just before the sun tips into the dark half of the year. So Libra being the cardinal sign that comes after Virgo, that is the place where light is no longer dominant within the solar year. That's where dark starts to become dominant, and it starts to increase very, very quickly here. So therefore, we can say that Virgo is the sign that metaphorically facilitates the handover from light to dark. We go from the light half of the year to the dark half of the year. The light half of the year being where there's growth, the dark being where there could be decay or things starting to fall away, be a little bit more silent. And Virgo, therefore, is a sign that is very well aware of the plentifulness of summer and that abundance of light that we find in the sign of Leo and even in the sign of Cancer. But it also is very aware of what is coming. It's very aware that we must prepare for the end symbolically. That doesn't necessarily mean literal death, although Libra, the place where that handover actually happens, is the exaltation of Saturn, Saturn representing death and decay within itself. You can see all the little intricate details in the way astrology just fascinatingly intertwines within itself here. So Virgo's the place right before that. It's a mutable sign, so it's a place of transition, a place of shifting here. So in that, within Virgo, we see that preparatory phase before we move into the darkness. We have the place of the harvest and the place of distribution between Virgo and Libra. So if Virgo likes to harvest and likes to have the resources available, Mercury represents resources as one of its significations, and that's the ruler of Virgo. Then in Libra, you have the disbursement, you have the leveling, you have the balancing of the scales. You can see how symbolically this works together. So being organized, being prepared, thinking practically, these are qualities of Virgo based on where the solar light is for that year and where it's coming from and where it's heading here. Very, very fascinating. So we can be very organized, we can be very diligent, we can be very practical in the sign of Virgo, but we can also be very critical. We can be critical of, as far as like a shadow side goes, we can be critical of, you know, maybe those that are not preparing the way that we are or paying attention to the details the way that we are. There can be a little bit of anxiety or hyperfixation that can come within the sign of Virgo. That's one of the more difficult or shadow sides of it, but that's because of the impendingness that is coming. On its very best side or most positive side, it's very prepared for the journey ahead into the underworld. So whatever that physically means, symbolically and figuratively and literally within our life. So there's very hardworking qualities with Mars in the sign of Virgo. Watch for overworking, watch for that anxiety to creep in or the mental flow that just keeps on going and doesn't stop at all. Feeling like you have to do it all at one time. And with that being said, kind of on that critical part that I was talking about, I feel like when Mars is in the sign of Virgo, again, Mars, our drive, ambitions, where we're moving, what is pulling us, what we're feeling like we need to do. When we have Mars in this sign, in this preparatory Virgo sign, this earth sign that is very, very practical and very, I was going to use forward focus, but that's not quite the word that I'm looking for. Very, very practical. We can find ourselves in a space where we are expecting others to do what we do. So don't expect you out of others when Mars is in the sign of Virgo. That is I feel like that's a good reminder for all of us to have with this transit coming in. I think it's interesting to note that Mars is going to be moving towards a conjunction with the South Node. The South Node is in the sign of Virgo, so we will talk about that later on when it gets a little bit closer to it, but just know that the moon, or as Mars starts to move through the sign of Virgo, it's going to be getting closer to that South Node, that point of release, completion, crystallization, and things coming to a culmination of some kind. So we will talk more about that in July when that perfects there. So that's the big movement that we have coming on through Tuesday, is the sign movement here for Mars. Then if we move forward into Wednesday here, we will see that the moon starts out in the sign of Pisces and then it moves into the sign of Aries just after 7 p.m. Eastern time. So really we spend most of the day with the moon in the sign of Pisces. We also have an aspect that is going on here this week. We have Jupiter making a square to Neptune this day here. I'm going to go ahead and put up the chart so that way we can all take a look at that here while we look at the aspect here. So I'm going to roll that chart forward a few days till we get to Wednesday, June 18th. And if you look at the chart that is on the screen here, you will see that Jupiter is at 2 degrees of Cancer in the 11th house in this chart, and Neptune is sitting at 2 degrees of Aries within this chart. Now, last week we talked about the square between Jupiter and Saturn that is coming through. Just as Jupiter comes off of that square with Saturn, it goes straight into that square with Neptune. So really you can think of these aspects as happening simultaneously. So if you need a refresher on Jupiter and Saturn, you can go back to last week there, or think back to last week and the things that have been going on, and then think into this week and see what's coming through there. So This aspect is exact through Sunday, and then it's going to be within 3 degrees until July 2nd. And it has been building for the last week or so. So like I said, you can really think of these two aspects as happening in conjunction with each other, or just kind of simultaneously happening. It is interesting to note that the moon within this chart, you'll see it at 29 degrees of Pisces, but the moon is going to make a conjunction with Neptune at the time that this aspect is exact. So that is just going to amplify this energy that is coming through here. So Jupiter being the planet that represents abundance and growth, our beliefs, our morals, our ethics, all of those core philosophical things. Those are those core philosophical structures that are in our life. Those are Jupiterian type things. Jupiter can also bring wisdom, growth, abundance. It can bring good luck. It can bring plentifulness. But a lot of that comes from those deeper philosophical things that Jupiter represents. So Jupiter is a teacher. And Neptune is a planet that represents faith. It represents things that we fully envelop ourselves in, and those things that which intoxicate us. It can be a little bit more romantic. It can be a little bit dreamy. In the sign of Aries, it can be willing to fight for what it believes in, or what it wants, or what it feels like it wants. So both of these planets have a level of dealing with belief and the things that we subscribe to. So when these two planets come into a square, into that scratchy, hard, difficult aspect, you can have a disconnection of faith of some kind. You can have something that is trialing your faith. Maybe there is something that you're putting effort into, and maybe there's roadblocks that you are meeting that are showing us that these two planets are having difficulty working together within some way. Both of these signs are cardinal signs, so they both want to initiate, they both want to start things, but they want to start things in different ways. They want to start things based on their own qualities that they have, based on their gender, based on their elements. So that's the difference here. Both of these planets want something to believe in. They both have a tendency towards optimism, grandiosity, enjoyment. In Aries, Neptune wants to fight for what it believes in. Like I already mentioned, it can be the spiritual warrior. It can be the space of advocating for the sovereign self. If you think about Aries representing the birth, the one, the individual, it's the first sign of the zodiac. So this is where things are initiated. This is where birth is initiated. So this is the individuation of the person. Meanwhile, in Cancer, Jupiter wants to create a nurturing space for all, not necessarily fight for individuality like the sign of Aries wants to, at least not in that fiery way. It may speak up for those that cannot speak for themselves to hold their own individuality, but it does not necessarily want to fight for it the way that Aries necessarily does. So I'm just going to put this up here so you can see a few things that we have going on here. We're going to go back. Boop. There we are. It's a new thing with me dealing with the camera switching and things like that. So we're changing our process a little bit. So deal with me just a little, bear with me a little bit here if you can. So back to our aspect. How can these two planets work together? They both want to start something. They both want to initiate something in the signs that they are in. They both have something to do with the higher ideals that we subscribe to. So how can this transit challenge our beliefs and our faith, but give us a place where we can grow from that? How can this transit challenge us to stand strong, to be firm, but also be gentle and empathetic? Those are qualities of Aries versus Cancer within its own right here. Squares, they always give us a place to grow from. And I'm wondering about the ability to grow within our own spiritual journey, within our own beliefs here. And maybe based on the different paradigms and the overall shifts that are happening within our lives, with this happening right in conjunction with the Jupiter-Saturn square that we were talking about last week. It can be very framework or very paradigm shifting when these planets are all coming together so close together. Jupiter is having so many new starts happening here with the with the conjunction with the sun that is coming up, and it was in conjunction with the new moon, as well as just recently moving into the sign of Cancer. Lots of new starts and initiations for Jupiter going on here. So yeah, interesting dynamics that we are coming through here with on Wednesday here. So that brings us into Thursday, where we have the moon in the sign of Aries all day, and we don't have any major aspects that are happening here. Like I said, most of the aspects are kind of happening, are kind of clustered. We have some days that are strong and some days that are maybe not quite as strong here this week. So from Thursday, we move into Friday, June 20th. And so we also have the sun moving into the sign of Cancer this week. 0 degrees of Cancer is the summer solstice point. So this is a very special moment beyond just the sun moving into the sign of Cancer. So the sign of Cancer can be very caring, very nurturing, very protective, very empathetic, very emotional, sensitive. It can be very connecting at a personal level. And when we have the sun in the sign of Cancer in this very nurturing type area, and we have Mars in the sign of Virgo, I feel like this is another good reminder for us just to be kind to ourselves as well as with others. Both of these signs, I feel like, Virgo and Cancer, they can both hyper-focus and internalize distress and not, they're both feminine signs. So they both have the possibility of being just a little bit more introvert rather than extrovert like the masculine signs have. So there's a little bit of that, you know, that which we contain can only be contained for so long, and usually once it comes out in a much louder way than if we would have addressed it right at the beginning. So just something to think about. And like I mentioned, this is not just the sun changing signs, this is the summer solstice point. So whether you live in the northern hemisphere, where this is ushering in the first day of summer, or you live in the southern hemisphere, symbolically, the solar story of the year is the same and it's applicable in the astrological language no matter where you live, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So talking about that solar story, just like we were talking about in the sign of Virgo, at this point, at 0 Cancer, this is the place where the light of the sun stops increasing and it starts to decrease. So if Libra is the cardinal sign where dark takes over and there's more dark than light within the solar day, then Cancer is the place where that transition starts to happen. So from 0 Aries to 0 Cancer, that light is constantly increasing. Maybe at different variables, but that light is growing, it's increasing. This is the signs of spring, growth, proliferation. Then we get to the sign of Cancer, and the sun is still very, very strong. It's at its strongest point. However, it slowly starts its descent back into the dark. So the light begins to fade and eventually the dark will come back into power. So here in the sign of Cancer, that descent into darkness and into the material world, if light represents that all-knowing, divine, spiritual level of creation, then the dark represents the material world or the heaviness of this world that we all live in compared to the divine, wherever it is that you feel like we have come from. So this is the point where the cycle starts to fall back into the material realm. And for this reason, the sign represents physical birth. This is the place of the moon. So we get the place where the light starts to come back down into the material world, into that heavy space, and we also get the place that ushers human life, the moon, Cancer, the nurturer, the womb of the zodiac, into this physical life. So these are those fascinating connections of the symbolism surrounding astrology here. I just absolutely love it. So it's a turning point within the solar year, within the astrological story. It's also one of the 4 points, the solstices and the equinoxes, that tether our Western zodiac wheel. So the the sidereal zodiac that Vedic astrology uses, that's based a little bit more on the actual placements of the stars at the time. We look at 0 Aries being the place of the spring equinox. So that is where our zodiacal wheel starts. So these 4 points, the 2 solstices and the equinoxes, these are very important points and very sensitive points within an astrological chart here. Yeah, so it's a very sacred and very felt moment, and one that has been acknowledged and celebrated by traditions around the world for a very long time in many, many different ways. Many of us have seen lots of different ways that that happens. And you know, the moon moves into the sign of Taurus less than an hour before the sun moves into the sign of Cancer. Cancer is the domicile or the place of the moon. Taurus is the exaltation of the moon, so it's basically the next best place for the moon to be in. So if we are empowering Cancer, we're empowering the moon. The sun moving into a sign empowers that sign. So it just feels like a little extra special nod to the sacred moment to me, with Taurus being the exaltation of the moon and the moon moving into that high uplifted place right before the sun moves into its own sign there. So just a little extra special nod at that very, very special moment that we have going on here. So that is what we have going on Friday. And then we move forward into Saturday here, and the moon is in Taurus all day, makes a square to Pluto. We have a aspect from Mercury to the north and the south node, trining the north node, sextiling the south node. And this could be a mental, emotional pull. Some people will feel the aspects to the nodes more than others. The nodes are the points that connect us to where the eclipses are that we are currently experiencing. So it's possible that on Saturday here, you may feel some sort of connection to where the eclipses are starting to play out here for you. And we're still pretty early on in the Virgo Pisces eclipse axis with the nodes being in those positions. So it may start to give you a little bit of an idea of the moving parts of the eclipses and how those are playing out for you. We also have Mars making a sextile to Jupiter this day. This is very hopeful and exuberant action. It can be very motivating, very uplifting, and very optimistic. Jupiter is optimistic and it expands. Mars wants to move. The sextile is within feminine signs, so those feminine signs like to provide. They like to provide extra support. They like to care for, they like to nurture a little bit. So there's a little bit of extra like internal support in these feminine signs. So a little additional support to the nice little sextile that we have going on here. Jupiter in the sign of Cancer wants to create a safe space, right? It wants things to be comfortable. Mars in Virgo may want to provide an organized and systematic way for Jupiter to do so. So maybe there's something that we've been wanting to care for and nurture, but we haven't known exactly how to go about it or something like that. Mars in Virgo may be able to help us organize, compartmentalize, make a to-do list, and then start checking things off or set a plan of some kind of which way to go. So what sustainable steps can we commit to here at the end of the week? Be realistic. When we're in the sign of Virgo, Virgo is an earth sign. It's very, very practical. So what sustainable steps can we commit to contribute to those supportive, fertile places within our lives? So looking into the sign of Cancer and the house that falls in within your own chart specifically. Or are there just places that feel like they want to be nurtured? You don't have to know your chart. You don't even have to look at it. You can just think about where things have been trying to grow and proliferate, and maybe if there's been some sort of wall, you know, Jupiter's been through that square with Saturn, so there's definitely a wall that could be up there. Things with the square between Jupiter and Neptune can be a little nebulous and it can be a little foggy. It can feel like we can't quite see our way through. So maybe Mars in the sign of Virgo here and the sextile between Mars and Jupiter can give us a way to be able to step forward. Maybe it can help us initiate routines or habits that will help us, or maybe it will help us step away from different routines or habits that don't really do us much good anymore. So that is it's a helpful little aspect. Sometimes those sextiles, they can be really subtle and they can be not like super, they can be not super super direct, and you might even notice them afterwards, but they can be very, very helpful energy. So the sextile between Jupiter and Mars feels like it's going to help Jupiter get a little bit of motivation to get moving with whatever has been brewing here. So that is where we end the week. On Saturday, like I said, we have a few things going on this week, but really overall, it's a pretty, I don't know, I guess I was going to say it's a pretty chill week, but you never know, because it has a lot to do with where it's hitting within your own chart and the things that are playing out within your own chart too. So that always has something to do with it as well. So thank you for joining me at looking at the astrology of this upcoming week. I will look forward to seeing you next week here, and I will look forward to seeing you at our live meditation Sunday night, 8:30 p.m. If you haven't already, remember to like the videos and the posts that you see, subscribe to the YouTube channels, like the, follow the Instagram page, like the Facebook page, all that jazz. It all helps a lot, and then it makes sure that you don't miss anything. And if you have anybody that you know that would be interested in the live meditation, invite them. The more, the merrier. So thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to spending some time with you next week. Have a great week, everybody.